Hello everyone. I am going to go through the legal disaster that is as ever, and the legal ramifications, including that affect directly and implicate the the palace, the royal family, their royal rota and global mainstream media, and also the controlled Megxit community and controlled Sussex squatty community. This, as ever, PR attempt has been a real exposure of the entire narrative and in the entire orchestration that connects Meghan Markle to the palace and to the Megxit community, especially, and also the Sussex community, as one big uniparty, as one big system, with the palace leading all of these communities and creating this dialectic deception of the century, because everyone's involved in the covering up of the illegitimacy and the fraud of this business and these products. Every single entity that I've just said to you, and we have now proof of that. And then what they've done, once there were questions and once I was starting to expose the business and who's liable, they've then attempted to cover it up with other distractions, with product reviews, trying to pick apart Meghan's supposed still legitimate business, making fraudulent claims that have then expanded upon the civil action or the class action that you could that Americans could potentially be looking into, that they could be reporting, in terms of legal breaches. Now, there's several different aspects of it, and I'm going to go through them with you today, because I think it's really important and that we make this really, really clear that this is a fraud and that this is a very serious legal class of issues that can be reported and discussed, and that this is how our community should be looking at this, irrespective of the strategy to cover it up and to mitigate risk has been. That you should be empowered enough and educated enough to know first of all, even just your legal position, but also the how you can legally look at this fraud and what it involves. I think that's really what I'm going to try to discuss with you today. I think it's really, really important that I'm Australian, and I know that there are legal breaches because of my knowledge of business, and I've had to study the American laws to be able to understand the breaches, and I'd like to discuss them with you. It also tells you to the fact that this fraud has taken place and has been orchestrated, the legal system, who's actually owning the legal system. We've already discussed the Constitution. We've already discussed how any commercial endeavours of the royal family is a breach of the constitutional agreement between British Parliament and the monarchy. It's also a breach with the monarchy and its Commonwealth of Nations, which includes America, covertly, but it's a massive breach in terms of the role of the monarchy. But we've also discussed within the Constitution that the legal system is in fact British, always has been. So that's why the Constitution is still the Constitutional Federation of the British Empire is still British, because it is founded on the British legal system. And the laws that pass are, in fact, British. So politics aside, the legal system in America is British. And it also just goes back and tells you that they are, in fact, still willing to commit fraud, willing to put up really serious legal allegations and breaches for the sake of this very, very shallow, very pathetic PR narrative of Meghan Markle and Megxit. You can ask yourself why. You can ask yourself, what's the current distraction? I've discussed many times the global restructure of the empire. That is what globalism is. That is what the fake WEF enemy is. That's what fake Bill Gates is. It's all a part of this British restructure of the empire. And it's definitely involved in that. But specifics you can delve into yourself and see exactly what's taking place that they're trying to hide. But, this goes again with Harry's visa. Harry's visa, all the redacted documents. Straight after, you had the As Ever launch, you had the cooking show, you had all of this drama and distraction that was then amplified and embellished by the Megxit community. And then as soon as there was anyone that had some sort of content like myself questioning the narrative as a legal issue, then things changed, and then they tried to re-steer you and redirect you to other issues like a court case, like a podcast, you name it. Anything they can really get their hands on to make it about Meghan, to make it about the PR construct that the palace has created, which is Meghan Markle. So let's get into it. The first thing is, since I have put out the videos of the labelling, there has been now the Sussex squatty community are blurring the labels. They're still receiving the products and still trying to legitimize it. That's what they've been instructed to do. And I know that now because this whole entire business and products and e-commerce site is an illegal front, just based on my own research. And so this is all just illegal, all of it. And any squatty community member account, any Megxit account that's promoting this business as legitimate is actually complicit in these legal breaches, because it's false advertising and fraudulent misrepresentation. But we'll look into that further as well. But at the moment, they are blurring the labels to ensure that no one asks any more questions and looks into it and investigates. We also have, Italy and Rome and Charles visiting. Anyway, we have as well the Megxit community are currently doing videos and re-endorsing a Royal Rota Daily Mail article. I think that's what they've been instructed to do on the product review of all 8 items by Daily Mail, and it's by Jane Hertz, a female. Now, initially on April the 6th, she received only the jam in a small FedEx box, and again, I already exposed that because she's not meant to have a Saturday delivery because the deliveries by legal print on the website are only meant to be delivered Monday to Friday, exposing the fraud again. So Royal Rota are actually heavily involved and corroborating with this illegal front of As Ever, and are also complicit. And so initially you've got here her with his small box doing a review of this jam, and now she's all of a sudden got 8 items. She says in this article that she received the honey the last, even though despite them having expedited delivery, which then is telling us that they gradually received each item. So from the 6th of April to the 11th of April, they've gradually received items for one purchase. It's again like exposing the fraud. At the same time, Jane Hertz of Daily Mail, again legally, and of course Meghan's not going to sue, is she? Because that's not the narrative these days. Jane Hertz illegally put out a false statement along with the Times and other Royal Rota, along with many other mainstream media globally. They've put through a false statement about the FDA law around jam and a spread, and they've stated that the spread to be mandated as a jam, you need to have equal parts sugar to equal parts fruit content being around 45 to 55%. And that is completely untrue. So they've actually made an illegal claim to legitimize this business that supposedly their enemy, Meghan Markle, is operating. Wink, wink. She has nothing to do with this. And they've made that illegal representation by stating that sugar is required to be the same amount as the fruit to be a jam, when the FDA law states very, very specifically that any saccharines, which includes sugar, that's not at all mandated. It's the fact that it has to be at least 45% fruit content, meaning that they've gone around a false shell company and business and product needing FDA approval by calling it a spread and putting in less than 45% raspberries rather than having an equal sugar content. They tried to endorse that she had lower sugar content because she's just so legitimate and so healthy, and this business is so legitimate, and that's why it had to be a spread, that it was the sugar content rather than the fruit content. And that's an illegal false misrepresentation and fraud, because this is financially motivated. And what it is it's the fact that she has less fruit, making the integrity of the product even more questionable. And then you've had this community covering it up, covering any illegitimacy and illegality of this business and these products, completely covering it up. And ensuring that this narrative continues. So let's get into, this is the saccharine, this is the exact law. It's the requirement of 21 CFR 150.160 mandates that fruit preserves and jams must have a minimum of 45% fruit by weight. Now the remaining 55% is allowed to be comprised of sugar and other ingredients. That doesn't give you a requirement of sugar percentage and ratio and portion. It is simply the integrity of a jam is 45% fruit, and the rest is left up to the remaining ingredients. It has to be 45% fruit. But that would then also require an FDA approval. And so the way they've gotten around that, the loophole in the system, is by calling it a spread, not needing FDA approval for a fraudulent business and a fraudulent product, and then selling it as a spread. But then they've tried to keep the integrity of the product at the same time. And so Royal Rota, specifically under instruction, have lied, which makes them legally complicit and implicated in this entire mess, directly relating, other than the constitutional breach, relating the palace to as ever fraud. And also, of course, the Megxit community and squatty community endorsing these products and pretending that they actually received real purchases and real deliveries. So I'm going to go through each legal angle and legal breach kind of area and specialization of law in this entire legal catastrophe of as ever. Initially, we have discussed in my previous videos, or I've discussed in my previous videos, the FDCA breaches that comes with saying on the product label manufactured for a company, rather than the manufacturer address and the manufacturer name. So then anyone legally liable for the production of the product is actually it should be the manufacturer, the producer or distributor. I don't think in cases it's marketer, but the distributor and the manufacturer of the product, rather than the brand. It's not enough to be a brand company for it to be legally responsible for the product itself. It has to be the ones that have actually produced with all the ingredients and all the and the end product of the product itself. They should be listed. And what they've done is they've put as ever in California, which is not either the producer or manufacturer or distributor. We've already clearly outlined that the distributor was in fact legally not meant to be the distributor, but is Snow Commerce. And that what they've done is they've put as ever the company as their name, with their Ohio address as the sender and shipper of these items. Completely illegal, but they are the ones that are meant to be responsible, and yet in the website with their print, they are saying that they are just a conduit. They are the e-commerce conduit of the company. They are not legally responsible for any of the products. So then you are facing a huge legal conundrum, very serious, because no one is responsible for the products. So if there's anything that goes wrong with food products, so how the hell FDA has not said anything is beyond me or any American in the Mexican community. You have a barrister, Law USA, who's meant to be working for the Department of Justice. They've said nothing about these legal breaches. You've got Queer Lips of Truth, who's also studying law and British, but studying in America, hasn't said anything about these breaches. It's just mind-boggling that it's not mind-boggling if you understand that this is just a huge fraud and a huge uniparty system. But it is mind-boggling to understand that how much they're deceiving you as a person and you as a country and the legal system in America. So this is the participation disclaimer stating that Snow Commerce is merely acting as a passive conduit for such distribution and is not undertaking any obligation or liability relating to any contents or activities on the site. So they are saying that they are not itself a distributor, that they are the e-commerce sites selling these items. They are not the distributor. Their services, and by law, they are not a distribution service. They do not provide a distribution service, and they should not be involved. And I also want to mention, because this will be covered here, that they do not have a return or refund policy due to the nature of the items, which is an absolute load of shit, especially when it comes to food items, as I've discussed about contamination, injury, false advertising of a food product, allergens, you name it. There should be, due to the nature of the products, there should be a refund or return policy. So let's start. Okay, so as ever, a fraud is facing several legal breaches, as I've said, that could result in a class action. We have thus far discussed the FDCA breaches, and now we're going to discuss the distribution, but also the lack of refund or return policy. Snow Commerce powers official merchandise stores for big brands like Netflix. So there's a Netflix connection with the investment of As Ever. Let's say they host a site, manage the storefront, and handle orders for Stranger Things merchandise. They claim to be just a service provider or platform, not legally responsible for the products or their fulfillment. However, if it turns out that Snow Commerce selects vendors or manufacturers, houses inventory, even briefly, which they have, packages and ships items or contains a third party to do so under their operational control, which they have, handles customer complaints, returns or refunds directly. Well, they handle the customer complaints directly as the e-commerce site. That's all the contact and communications under that website is Snow Commerce, not As Ever. They are listed as legally as Ever's affiliate, and the ones that are completely operating As Ever website. Then legally they're no longer just a conduit. So it's just some word salad. Possible laws, regulations breached or risked. 1. Consumer protection and misrepresentation. If they claim we're not the seller, but are actively managing transactions and shipping, FTC rules USA, misrepresenting the nature of the business. State attorney generals could investigate consumer deception. Number 2, product liability. If a Stranger Things hoodie has a defect, e.g. burns in the wash or causes a rash and snow-handled fulfillment, they could be strictly liable for harm alongside the manufacturer. Courts could say they're part of the stream of commerce. 3. E-commerce disclosure requirements. Under US laws and likely international ones, they may be required to disclose clearly who the seller is. If customers think they're buying from Netflix but Snow is doing fulfillment, that could violate truth in advertising laws. So right now we're just looking generally at Snow Commerce and not its connection to As Ever, but I'll do that just under this description here. 4. Sales tax and customs. If they ship internationally or across US states, they may need to remit sales tax, especially post-Wayfair decision in the US. If goods are cross borders, they might be considered to be the importer of record and legally liable for customs declarations. They are not. They've intentionally, by design, put through, and intentionally but legally, said that they only ship across the US states, that they do not internationally ship. That's definitely intentional because of this. Platform immunity, Section 230 or similar. By acting as a neutral service provider, platforms may claim immunity from liability for third-party content or sales. But if Snow is controlling product flow, that immunity may not apply. Courts could treat them as a retailer or distributor, not just a platform. So the legal responsibility changes. Bottom line, if Snow Commerce handles more than just the website, backend, and customer interface, if they're even indirectly involved in shipping or fulfillment, then saying we're just a service provider doesn't hold water legally. They could face liability, regulatory action, and even consumer lawsuits, depending on the specific issue. How Snow Commerce may be misrepresenting their legal role and potentially breaching consumer protection and e-commerce laws. Key facts in this scenario. Snow Commerce operates the online store for As Ever, listing food products, e.g. crepe mix, cookie mix, honey, and the raspberry spread, etc., etc. Products are labelled under the As Ever brand. The site claims Snow Commerce is only a conduit, not legally responsible for the products. There is no refund policy for food items or return policy. Yet Snow Commerce is the one actually sending the products, i.e. handling fulfillment and shipping. Legal and regulatory issues Snow Commerce could be facing. 1. Misrepresentation of business role. If Snow Commerce is shipping goods but claims to be only a conduit, that's deceptive under US consumer protection laws, FTC Act, state unfair trade practices laws. The FTC could argue that they are misleading consumers by pretending to be a neutral marketplace while acting as a retailer or distributor, while claiming no liability. Courts often look at conduct, not titles. If they're fulfilling orders, they are not a passive conduit, so that is a false misrepresentation and fraudulent misrepresentation. 2. Product liability exposure. Since food products can lead to health issues, e.g. allergens, spoilage, contamination, any entity in the distribution chain, including a company that ships the food, can be held liable for injuries or illness, mislabeled ingredients, improper storage or handling. Which, this is an office, a building that has an office. Where did you store the inventory? How did you store the inventory? Not exactly transparent and no full disclosure, just misrepresentation. Snow commerce may be exposing itself to strict liability even if the product is technically from as ever. Unfair or deceptive, no refund policy or no return policy. Number 3. Saying no refunds or returns for food may violate state consumer protection laws, which often require clear, fair refund or return terms and exceptions for defective or misrepresented goods. If Snow Commerce ships a damaged or expired item and refuses a refund or return, that could trigger legal complaints. Also, if consumers buy from As Ever's website but Snow is actually fulfilling it, then the refund policy could be viewed as deceptive or contractually unclear, especially if no clear party is listed as the seller. 4. False designation of origin or seller. If the As Ever site is operated or powered by Snow Commerce but doesn't make that clear, this might violate the FTC's endorsement guidelines or Made in USA labeling rules if origin is misrepresented. The site could be misleading consumers about who they are transacting with. So that's a bit blurred there because they're definitely making it unclear who they're transacting with and who's responsible legally, but they are the origins, well, from what we know, the origins are within the US, especially while Snow Commerce is in the US. Except actually their partner and the company that's acquired Snow Commerce, I think, is from Poland or Lithuania or something like that. I can't remember. So that's interesting. 5. Labeling food safety and registration violations. If Snow Commerce is handling food products, they may be considered a food facility and need FDA registration under the Bioterrorism Act. If they store, pack, or distribute food, which they are, so there you go. They're meant to be registered under the FDA. Improper storage or unlabeled allergens equals major risk of FDA enforcement. Summary. Snow Commerce, by handling the shipping of As Ever branded food products while claiming they are only a conduit and disclaiming liability, may be 1. Misrepresenting their role under consumer law. 2. Dodging refund responsibilities or return responsibilities unlawfully. 3. Assuming product liability through their conduct. And 4. Violating food distribution regulations if not properly registered or compliant, which they are. This could open them to FTC complaints, state AG investigations, class action risk, and even FDA scrutiny if something goes wrong with the food. So now I'm going to tie what we've clarified and confirmed, legal responsibility of Snow Commerce, with the incorrect labeling of the products. Literally their labels have incorrect or illegal information for the stating manufactured for, and the As Ever California company, that is a shell company, and the fact that it's a shell company address. It's in fact owned, this building here is owned by the Star LLC. And by March 2024, we had the Star publicly announce that this building will be taken down and redeveloped and redesigned to be an office complex, by starting development in 2026. This is the office that have distributed, stored, and shipped the products. This is, what address is it? 1340 Clay Street, Cincinnati, Ohio. This is what is stated on the boxes labels that are now being blurred. You can see this is a complete Mark Zuckerberg kind of office, open plan. And this is the product label. It says clearly manufactured for, instead of the manufacturing address, which has been stated by mainstream media, another misrepresentation that the staff have had to sign NDAs to hide the secret location of the manufacturing plant, which is unlawful. Manufactured for is the same address that's owned by the Star LLC and being developed for that office building by 2026. So it's just like Archwell is a shell company and a fraud. And so then I know for a fact that this building wasn't meant to manufactured for, so they've tried to get away with the wording. Anyway, no, I'll just leave it as that. So let's have a look here. So we're getting into even more legal questionable territory. Here are the key legal problems and risks Snow Commerce and As Ever as a brand may be exposed to. 1. Misleading and non-compliant food packaging. If food products are labelled manufactured for As Ever in California with no physical manufacturer address, using an address that no longer belongs to As Ever and is instead tied to a real estate development company, the Star LLC, then the products may be in violation of federal food labelling laws, including FDA labeling requirements, US law under 21 CFR 101.5. Food labels must include the name and address of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor, which they have not put either Snow Commerce or the manufacturer. If using a manufactured for or distributed by label, the actual business address must be valid and traceable, for which the business registered is under that address that belongs to the Star LLC, not As Ever. Using a non-functional or misleading address, especially a sold or demolished property, likely violates the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act, FDCA, the Fair Packaging and Labelling Act, FPLA. This could trigger FDA enforcement actions, especially if a complaint is filed, potential state-level violations, e.g. California's Sherman Food Law. 2. Traceability and recalls. The lack of a proper manufacturer or fulfillment address also interferes with FDA-required traceability protocols, especially under FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act, the ability to conduct consumer recalls if there's contamination or allergy risk. If Snow Commerce is shipping the goods but not named on the packaging and the listed company doesn't exist or can't be reached, regulators could find this deliberately evasive, a potential public health risk. 3. Fraud or deceptive business practices. Using a fake or no longer valid address, particularly on consumable goods, could be construed as intentional deception, a violation of state unfair and deceptive acts and practices UGAP laws, and grounds for civil penalties, product seizures, or class action lawsuits. If snow commerce is knowingly shipping products under this kind of label while claiming no responsibility, that could look especially bad in the eyes of regulators. 4. Liability for health or safety issues. If a consumer has an allergic reaction or gets sick and the product cannot be traced to a real reachable company, snow commerce could be held liable by default as the last known responsible entity in the distribution chain. Their disclaimers of responsibility may be meaningless if they ship the goods and the labels are non-compliant. 5. Real property misrepresentation. Using an address tied to a demolished or sold building is not only a labeling violation, but might also raise mail fraud or false advertising concerns, especially if the address was used to build consumer trust, e.g. made in California, which I think they have, because they talk about the shipping times being CST. Is that California Standard Time? When it's shipped from Ohio, Cincinnati? Or is it Cincinnati Standard Time, CST? Not too sure about that. You can let me know. TLDR, major legal red flags. Mislabeling food without a valid manufacturer or distributor address violates FDA regulations. Using a defunct or misleading address undermines traceability and could be considered fraudulent. If Snow Commerce ships these products, they may be legally liable regardless of their just a conduit claims. This really makes me laugh. It also makes me really angry at Brittany from Royal News Network, who has lied about the purchase of those products, but also with that weaponized her fake purchase and this fraud, claiming this business as legitimate, and saying anyone who has asked questions regarding any legal breaches, these very, very serious legal breaches and fraud, is a conspiracy theorist and spewing conspiracy theories. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You want to talk about the censorship industrial complex that Trump campaign has created from out of his ass? This is the real censorship complex. This is the real situation. The fact that this entire shallow, small PR narrative can get away with all these legal breaches really tells you who is in fact in charge of the legal system in America, and how this is an international issue now, because Royal Rota and mainstream media have then got involved legally and are now implicated, along with all these other community accounts from all across the world legitimizing this business. It's amazing. So now I think we're done. Oh, I've got two more. So now we're going to get into which I'm trying to be as fluent and as organic as possible, trying to tie you into these laws and these breaches so it doesn't feel like a massive lecture, which it is, and I apologize, but law is dry, and so it just needs to be discussed and exposed and transparent. So, breaching the law regarding as ever in California being a shell company. I'll show you here the picture. This is the office complex that the Star LLC will start developing in 2026, but have purchased that address, that land, to destroy that building in 2024. And again, here is that label. All right. Breaching the law regarding as ever in California being a shell company. Registering a business like as ever to an address that is not legitimately under its control, such as one owned by the Star LLC, can trigger serious legal issues, especially if it's done to mislead consumers, regulators, or partners. Here's how that breaks down. 1. Business registration fraud. False statements. If someone registered as ever using the address of a property owned by the Star LLC without authorization or knowledge of the owner, that may violate state business code violations. Each US state requires that businesses use a real, valid business address where they can be contacted. Obtain consent if using an address that belongs to another legal entity, like a leased office. California, for example, if that's the state in question, has laws under the Corporations Code and Business and Professions Code that make false statements on business filings a misdemeanor or civil violation. Now, I want to be very clear. There wouldn't be no consent to lease this building out because they're going to demolish it and they're redeveloping the entire, they're putting through a new design, a new building. So there would be no leasing. Who knows at this point how far into the demolishing of the building it is? I don't know. I can't check. But we don't even know if the building itself is safe. Whatever, we just don't know. But they wouldn't be leasing. There's no evidence provided prior that it's being leased. I'm sure that will be potentially an angle that could be covered up, this illegality of this business, but you have to question then, why would a company that's about to build a massive office be leasing the building they're about to destroy or are destroying? 2. Mail fraud. 18 US Code 1341. If the business uses that false address to receive mail, especially involving orders, payments, refunds, or marketing materials, then it could trigger federal mail fraud statutes, especially if the address was used to trick consumers into thinking there's a real office, warehouse, or manufacturer presence. Snow Commerce or an affiliated entity knowingly facilitated or supported this setup. Surprise, surprise, it's a fraud. 3. Consumer deception or false advertising. Using a prominent California address, especially one that sounds legitimate or high-end, could imply the company has a physical presence, credibility, or manufacturing capacity that it does not. That's a deceptive trade practice under FTC Act Section 5, California's Unfair Competition Law, UCL, and False Advertising Law, FAL. Penalties could include fines, court-ordered disclosure corrections, and potential class action exposure. 4. Trademark or commercial misrepresentation. If the address is being used on product labels, like with food items or business filings, it could be considered passing off or misleading origin of goods. Commercial misrepresentation, especially under the Lanham Act, 15 USC 1125, which governs false designation of origin in commerce. Real property, number 5, real property or corporate trespass. If the Star LLC do not authorize the use of their address and it's used on business filings, publicly accessible websites, and product labels, which again could be another cover-up. If you've got the palace of the monarchy, the British Empire, owning this legal system, it's easy to manipulate these sorts of things. So I just want to make that clear as well. Then they may have grounds to file cease and desist, a civil suit for unauthorized use of their business address, sometimes framed as corporate identity misuse. Bottom line, registering as ever under the address of the Star LLC without a lease, legal right, or permission, and using that address publicly for selling food products may violate state business registration laws, federal fraud and consumer protection laws, FDA labeling regulations, and potentially property rights of the Star LLC. Up to the last part. This is Royal Rota and international mainstream media making a false statement about that FDA mandate on jams and how to differentiate between jams and spreads. A spread doesn't require any percentage ratio of or portion of the fruit content and the sugar content. But, let's take away the sugar content because there's no mandate even for jams on that. It's purely based on the fruit content. So you either have a jam that has 45% fruit that needs an FDA approval, or you have a spread that has less than 45% fruit content that does not require an FDA approval. Because this business is fraudulent and everything is fraudulent and a PR facade, they've created a loophole within the system by calling it a spread, and then trying to sell you a fraudulent misrepresentation that it was based on the sugar content being less. So the integrity of the product is still 45% fruit content, which it cannot be. Otherwise, it would be jam, and they would need FDA approval for that. So you've got the Times. This was yesterday, I think, anyway, who cares? This is Daily Mail. Per fruit and wine, jam is regulated by the FDA and must come from a single fruit containing at least 45% fruit and 55% sugar. So, the fact that no Megxit channel, no YouTuber is discussing any of these legal breaches should be highly concerning to you and a red flag. Anyone who is pretending to tell you the truth is pretending to be anti-Meghan Markle, pro-royalist. Well, they're definitely pro-royalist. They're protecting the royal family and protecting this palace narrative and orchestration for political gains, a political agenda of Trump and the British monarchy, because this Trump has pushed the policies for the British monarchy and the empire that is the British Empire. And let's just leave it as that. So let's break it down. One, misrepresentation of FDA law in advertising or labeling. If, as ever, an associated media, mainstream media, are publicly misrepresenting FDA law about raspberry spread versus jam, especially to promote or justify a product labeling, there are several US laws and regulatory frameworks potentially being violated. Let's break it down. 1. Misrepresentation of FDA law in advertising or labeling. Violation: false or misleading statements about regulatory compliance. If a company publicly states something like, "This raspberry product is labelled as a spread, not a jam, because FDA requires sugar content to match fruit content for it to qualify as jam, and this is not accurate per FDA definitions," that could constitute false advertising, misbranding under FDA regulations, and consumer deception. 2. Relevant law. Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act, FDCA, under 21 U.S. Code 343, misbranded food. A food is misbranded if its labeling is false or misleading in any particular. Section 343A. It purports to be or is represented as a product defined by a standard of identity, like jam, but does not conform to that standard. Section 343G. If, as ever, is calling it a spread, but using justification that misstates federal law, especially to influence purchase decisions, the FDA can act. 3. Standard of identity for jam, 21 CFR 150.160. This is what I had already stated to you at the beginning of this video. According to the FDA's Code of Federal Regulations, a fruit jam must have not less than 45% by weight of the fruit ingredient, meaning the raspberries. The required sugar amount is tied to soluble solids content, or the saccharines, over or equal to 65%, not equal parts fruit and sugar, as falsely claimed. So claiming the sugar must be equal fruit content is legally false, and using that as a justification for the term spread rather than jam is a misstatement of US law. 4. False advertising and consumer deception. FTC Act, Section 5, 15 U.S.C. 45. This prohibits unfair or deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce. If mainstream media articles or, as Eva's website, product descriptions are publishing false interpretations of FDA law, doing so to promote or defend a product's labeling, and influencing consumers' perception of compliance, which they all are, then both the company and publishers could face FTC scrutiny, which I would also then lend to this Megxit and Sussex Squad community. If they're promoting the spread and its integrity and its fruit content, then they would be also complicit and implicated in legal breaches. 5. Product liability and legal reach via reliance on false information. If a consumer has an allergy, dietary restriction, or other health concerns, I don't know, like diabetes, and they rely on a false legal claim about the product, or the fact that they're literally concerning over their health, thinking the integrity of the product has 45% or more fruit content, which is false. They rely on a false legal claim about the product, believing it's different from jam due to less sugar, but in reality, it's not in compliance or not properly labelled. Then this opens the door to civil lawsuits, class actions based on misrepresentation, consumer protection claims under state UDAP laws. 6. Possible wire or mail fraud, 18 US Code 1341, 1343. If the false claim of legal interpretation is broadcast via mainstream media, used in and alternative media like social media, like YouTube content, used in interstate commerce, online shipping, advertising, intentionally misleading to drive sales, there's an argument in severe cases for fraud statutes to apply, especially if it can be shown the misstatement was knowing, reckless, and financially motivated, which they all are. In summary, possible laws breached. Law, this is a type of law or regulation, the breach and the type. 1. 21 USC 343 misbranding under the FDCA. 2. 21 CFR 150.160 violation of jam standard of identity. 15 USC 45 FTC Act, false advertising and unfair practices. State UDAP laws, consumer deception, 18 USC 1341 and 1343, wire mail fraud, if intentional and widespread, which it is, it's a global farce and a global fraud. There you go. So that's what I've covered at the moment. I think there needs to be a real seriousness to this debate, because what always the strategy and the effort is of this community and of mainstream media and of the Palace Orchestration is to trivialize this, all of it that's regarding Meghan, and to make it just some little circus act and drama act that you never look at and think twice about. And you never think twice about them and their involvement and their participation in something that's very, very illegal and fraudulent. And it speaks larger to the system that is controlling it all. So I wanted to take this time to really talk about that, because I think it's just so important. And not many people know laws or inquire about laws because it is so dry, and unless it involves you specifically, doesn't even involve me because I'm Australian, but I know to look at it. But if it doesn't really involve you, it's not, you don't find it relevant or important. But this is so serious. These numerous breaches. For you to look at this seriously and go, this is exactly why you should be thinking twice about what you're sold and told, and stopping the trivialization or the moving to another distraction like the court case, and placing seriousness of Harry's court case over this illegal fraud that is as ever. You should be really placing the blame and looking at these people involved, these entities, and their motives. Thanks, guys.